A very good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Veteran Speak segment of the Defense Archive. Today, we have with us a very accomplished and a very distinguished military veteran, Colonel Anirudh Prasad. Colonel Anirudh Prasad, sir, has been the Director of Operations of the Indian Army from 1995 to 2019 and has had a wonderful 24-year tenure service in uniform. He's led some critical missions, been a part of some very, very important operations, and has been very successful in leading a huge troop of men into great success. After retirement, he did his certification in business management from IIM Lucknow and also had a very successful stint in Amazon for over a year. Currently, he works in the security domain in Reliance Retail. We are very, very excited to speak to him, and it's an absolute honor to have him with us today. So without further ado, let's get into it and let's start speaking to sir about his experiences in uniform. A very good morning,
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you. Very good morning to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here with us. So we have a set of questions which we usually ask our veterans, and we'd like to know about from you, from your own words, what it's like to be an officer in the Indian Army for over all of these years. So with your permission, can I start off, sir?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. So my very first question to you goes all the way back to when you actually decided to wear the uniform and decided to serve the country. Was there something in particular that motivated you to do this, or something that made you take this decision amongst the several other career options which are actually available?
Well, if I go back about 30 years back, um, I come from a forces background. My father was also in the services. My uncles were in the services, the Air Force to be precise. So I hadn't seen life much outside the Air Force, so to say. And I mean, for me, I didn't need any external motivation to join the defense. I was already motivated. I would see these young officers in their smart, dapper uniforms, looking larger than life. And I would say, yeah, that is what I want to be. And they were so full of life. They had oodles of confidence in them, and that is what I said, that this is what I always wanted to be. So never in my mind was there any doubt that I want to do something else. Of course, in those days there wasn't much option as well, so either it was engineering or it was medical, or something new, computer engineering had just come in. So there wasn't any option there. Of course, my dad never wanted me to join the services. He said, enough is enough. I think you need to be a doctor or an engineer. So my dad was very keen that I joined something else except the services. But I don't think I was ready for it. Of course, I gave all the exams in my 12th, all the entrance examinations for engineering. I gave it for medical, though of course I wasn't serious about it. And if you're not serious, you're not going to clear those exams. But the exam that I gave most seriously was the NDA exam, which was held in October of I remember 2000. Sorry, it's 90. 90. And the results came out before my boards exam, and I said I just need to pass my boards exam and then join the academy. Yes, the results did come out. I cleared it. Along with me, 5 of my classmates also got through. I still remember that day when my dad didn't sign the consent form, which every parent is supposed to sign. And we were sitting for dinner, and my dad said, "No, I'm not signing that consent form. You can get it signed by somebody else." And then I told my mom, you always get to work around with your mom. So I told my mom, I said, "Mom, there's nothing else I would want more in life than to be an officer in the military." Of course, she came around. She convinced my dad, and it didn't take much to convince him, because he knew that I was very adamant. Finally, he signed the paper, and I submitted it, and that is how the story began of my joining the NDA. The other thing was being posted in all these small Air Force bases. Um, you would see these fighter jets taking off from behind your house. The roar of those engines that is what motivated me. Of course, fate and destiny had something else in store for me. I couldn't be a fighter pilot, which I really wanted to. But of course, no regrets. I'm happy with what happened and how it turned around, and that's my background to joining the services.
That's quite a story. So yeah, I'm sure your father is very glad that he finally came around to signing the form.
Yeah, they're very proud. My parents are very proud of me.
I'm sure, sir. That's actually amazing. So then moving on from there to the next rung of your career, we've heard a lot about military training and how taxing, demanding, as well as rewarding it can be. The 72 to 80-week training at NDA, IMA, OTA, whichever academy it is, there's so much that is said and written about it by the cadets themselves. What was your experience like when you were training at the academy? And after all of these years, is there one particular incident, pleasant, unpleasant, funny, serious, that you recollect from your time in this thing? Because we know that a sense of camaraderie like nowhere else develops amongst the cadets at the academy. So anything that you'd like to share from your time there?
Right. So when I joined the academy, there's an interesting story to that as well. People thought that I may not be able to go through the academy. The background to that was I had joined a boarding school in my 10th class, and I couldn't take the ragging, and I came back home. And everybody who knew me, especially my family, they thought that I will not be able to, go through the rigorous training that is there in the academy. If I couldn't survive in a boarding school, how could I survive in the academy? But I took that as a challenge, and I said, come what may, I will prove everyone wrong. And I joined the academy, and I just shut myself off. I mean, I became numb, something like comfortably numb. You just go through the paces, you go through the motion without feeling it. And that's what I said. I said the best way to go through this is to just kind of de-link from your emotions, and that's what I did. And the initial few months were hard. I will not deny that. It's the same even for the kids who join today. If you're able to survive the first few months, I think you get used to it, and you can then go through the motions. There are a lot of instances, both humorous, something which I always remember. But one incident which I clearly remember was at the Indian Military Academy, wherein we have these outdoor exercises where we simulate battle procedures like attack, defense. So you go out for 5 to 7 days. You camp outside. You simulate these battle procedures, and then you come back to the camp. But you don't come back in vehicles. You have a point-to-point march. You're given a time limit, and you're supposed to touch all those points and get back to the academy. It's kind of, you're racing against time. It's not walking also. It's running from one point to another, and it can last from anywhere from 8 hours to 24 hours, depending how good you are at map reading. So we didn't have GPS in those days. You had just a map and a compass, and then you are left in those hills of Dehradun, wherein you are supposed to run back to the academy. And I remember, no names, of course. There was this guy. He was a huge guy with us in our team. Um, very good, but he couldn't run. So we said, what do we do? He's pulling the entire team back, and you're supposed to go as a team. You can't go, individually.
Hmm.
So one of the guys had a brainwave. He said, okay, the next checkpoint, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out a stretcher. We're going to put him on the stretcher, and we'll say that he's injured his leg and he cannot walk. So, and we'll leave him there. We'll leave him there, and then we'll push off from there. So everyone said, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, we reached the checkpoint, and there was this officer who was taking the report, and he saw two guys carrying the stretcher with this huge cadet lying on the stretcher, and he said, what happened to him? So our captain told the officer that, this guy is injured. He's hurt his leg and he cannot walk. So we leave him and then we'll push on. So he smiled. He just looked at us and he said, I think that's not good. But I think that's a great idea. You can simulate this in war. In war, you're not going to leave your guy behind. So I think you guys should carry him till the end on the stretcher. And then he looked at us and he said, dare you put him off the stretcher? Because I know this guy is all right. And you will not believe it, for the entire next 13 to 14 hours, we were carrying him on the stretcher from one place to another. Of course, we made him run when nobody was looking. But when we reached the checkpoint, of course, we'd put out the stretcher, tell him, ask him to lie down, and then we would, give the report. So this is one of those humorous incidents that happened. We thought that we'll get rid of it, but the officer was smarter than us, I'm sure, because he had gone through the same thing, and he said, "Yeah, great, carry him on the stretcher now till the end." So yeah, so that was one of the incidents that is etched in my mind, and which now when we as Postmates we get together, we think about that. And of course, that huge guy is still serving in the army. He's become a brigadier.
Okay.
Yeah, and we pull his leg now. So
these are quite.
yeah.
I think these memories stay with you for the rest of your life, right?
Absolutely. And imagine you're going through the jungles at night. You're crossing streams, and you have this guy on the stretcher, and then you're cursing and you're cribbing that who gave that bright idea. So yeah, so that was a one part of the training which I remember.
That's quite a story, sir. Yeah. So then again, of course, when you leave the academy and you come out, military leadership, especially the leadership in the Indian military, is acclaimed worldwide. It's said to be one of the most premier institutions when it comes to leadership. From your experience in your tenure, has there been a leader of any rank who commanded you, who led you, who's left a mark upon you in any way?
Well, I won't be fair to all the leaders who have been in my life, because all of them have left a mark on me right from the time I joined the National Defense Academy, 3 years there, 1 year at IMA, and then through my service in the regiment. So I to name one, if I have to, then it would definitely be my commanding officer, and I'll take his name also, Brigadier Ravi Jairath. I was his adjutant. I think he left a mark on me, and when I served under him, the way he carried himself, he was, I would say he had class. He was good professionally. He was good with the men. The most important was that the troops loved him. And, if your troops love you, you realize that, that you've done something good. And when I saw the respect that the men had for him in whatever he did, I mean, he would just have to say that, okay, all of you jump into the well, and the entire regiment would jump into the well without asking. And that is the kind of leadership that the army looks at, to obey without questioning. and they will only do it if they feel that the leader himself is going to lead them from the front. I mean, if he says jump into the well, he'll be the first one to jump into the well.
Absolutely.
He's not going to be giving the orders from behind. And yes, he's one person. Of course, there were others as well, but he is one who I always have a lot of respect for. And I thought to myself that when I get the opportunity to command my regiment, I would also want to be like him. I tried to be like him. I don't know whether I was successful or not, but yes, he was one person I really admire even to this date. So
that's very nice. Thank you for sharing that. Then my next question is more about you. What are some? Could you tell us some of the missions and operations that fall in the non-classified domain that you've been a part of during your tenure?
right. Most of the operations would not come under the non-classified domain, but there is one incident which I remember very, very vividly. In fact, I wrote an article also, and I put it on LinkedIn, which is synonymous with the Amazon leadership principle. This incidence of how the different leadership principles came into being in that particular incident. So it was in the year 2001 when, yes, 2002, right, after the Parliament attack, the Indian Army was mobilized, and it was given the name as Operation Parakram. Google it, you'll come to know about it. So Operation Parakram was when post the attack on the Parliament on the 13th of December 2001, the entire Indian Army was mobilized, and it was not just the Army, but the Air Force and Navy as well. There was a recall from leave. People had to go back to their regiments. At that point in time, I was in a training establishment called the Army Air Defense College. I was posted there, and I saw my regiment being deployed somewhere in the western sector, and of course, my commanding officer was Brigadier Jairat that time, Colonel Ravi Jairat. And I told my bosses in the Air Defense College that I want to go to the regiment. I don't want to be in this peacetime location. I want to be with my regiment, especially during this time. Yes, subsequently they sent everyone, but I was the first one to be sent out from that peace time posting. I joined the regiment, and there's total nobody knows what's happening, because everything is so I would say gray, and the fog of war exists over there. You don't know what's going to happen next. Where do you have to go? So my CEO, he called me to his office. It was in a tent, of course, and he says, Anirudh, it's good to have you back in the regiment, but I hope you're ready with whatever comes through, because we don't know what's going to happen. So the first thing he made me do was sign my will. Yeah. So the first thing I did was to sign my will and hand over my identity card to the regiment, because when you go into operations, you don't go with your identity card. You have a disc which gives you it's something like the dog tags which the Americans wear, which just gives you a name, number, and your religion. Right. So I was handed that. And the next day he told me that, you need to go to, he gave me area on the map. And he said, you need to go here, and you need to map this area with a particular piece of equipment. So it was a new equipment, and I had to go and map that area. It was close to the border. So the next day I collected my team. One night before, I briefed them. We had one vehicle, we had 10 guys, and we had this piece of equipment. Now, that night it rained heavily in the deserts. It was torrential rain. All the marks on the sand, everything was wiped out. So we reached the location. It was about 150 kilometers from where we were towards the border. We reached there. I went to the forward headquarter location. I took the briefing. The guy just told me one thing. He said, because now it's operations, the area is mined. They've put mines. So it's been marked on the ground as per the Geneva Convention. You're supposed to mark your minefields. You've got to so that your people do not accidentally go into the minefield.
Okay.
So he said the minefield has been marked over here. He marked it on my map, and he said, just be careful, take a diversion, and then go to your respective area. We went. Of course, I was following the map. And I think it was on half an hour into that track when I realized we should have come across the markings of the minefield. And I didn't see anything. As per the map, we were into the minefield. I said, no, probably there might be a mistake. So we kept going ahead. And then I was in the lead vehicle. There were two vehicles behind me. And I saw this sign on the ground right in front of me on the sand. And I see that red triangle with the skull mark, which shows that, that's a minefield marking. But that, because of the rains prior, it had blown away. So the marking was, to cut the long story short, we had entered the minefield and we didn't know about it. Now that was a situation where I realized that we've come into the minefield and we had come in. I could see the road behind from where we had taken a detour, which was about 400 meters, 400 to 500 meters. Now, I realized that if I do anything right now, the men are going to panic because you don't know which, the next step you take, you might get blown off because you don't know where the mine is. You don't know the layout of the minefield. Now, I had two options over there. One option was I had to go another 800 meters. I could have gone 800 meters and gone to the next location, cross the minefield. The other option was to go back. I said, let me retrace my step back because I don't know if we go 800 meters ahead, we might just hit a minefield. Right. So what we did was I told my guys to keep sitting. I called the driver. I got off the vehicle and I said that, reverse your vehicle on the same tread marks that you've come on.
Okay.
And it was just about 400 meters. The sun was right overhead. It was 12 p.m. in the noon. We slowly started inching. And I remember that every minute seemed like an hour. Somehow, slowly, we reversed and we got onto the road after 4.5 hours. But we lived to fight another day the next day. So yeah, that was one incident where, I felt that if I hadn't maintained my cool, if I had panicked, the troops would have panicked. Probably we would have had casualties. Probably our equipment would have been blown up. So at these point of times, you need to really be calm. You need to be composed and you need to think. And I was just 5 years into the army. I was about 25 years old. Yes, but I was leading men who were 40 plus. And the minute they know that you flinch or you kind of show that you're scared, panic sets in.
Right.
So that's how we got out of it. And again, like I said, we live to fight another day.
Just listening to the story is putting me at the edge of my seat, sir. To imagine being in that situation, people must have done a wonderful job. So clearly your thinking ability on your feet has proved to be very valuable to the team. So that's...
Thank you. It was just instinct. I would say it was just basic instinct to survive.
Yeah, right. And that's what makes a good officer, sir, to have that kind of instinct. So that's indeed wonderful. Now my next question is a little on the lighter side. There's a lot, like of late, there's a lot of media portrayal of the armed forces in terms of films, movies, books, and other forms of popular culture, as well as news media. Sometimes, which is a common observation that's floating around, that sometimes this portrayal is a little inaccurate, a little misrepresented for maybe, say, cinema purposes or movie purposes. As an officer who's actually been a part of the establishment, what do you have to say about the way the forces are portrayed on cinema? Like very recently, Shesha, the film on Captain Vikram Batra, it broke all records in the movie domain. Similarly, last year there was another one about Gunjan Saxena, who's the first woman fighter pilot in the Kargil war. So, what is your take on how they portray the men and women that you've served with?
Well, to be very honest, firstly, I would say that it's a good thing the way the heroes are being portrayed, right? At least the people are getting to know about what sacrifices our brave hearts have made. But at times they haven't done the research just to sell or to get high ratings. They put, how should I put it, they don't put the right stuff over there. A lot of it seems unreal, some things which actually do not happen. Case in point is Gunjan Saksena's movie. I mean, the way it has been portrayed that a lady has been treated by the other officers, it's totally incorrect. It gives out a very, very wrong, I would say, portrayal of these services. It's something that it's something which is which I would say needs to be cleared by the defense. If you're showing a movie on the defense, it needs to be cleared by our defense people, because we don't want the wrong message to go out. We don't want the wrong wrong things to go out, which people feel that, oh, this is how it happens in the services, whereas it never happens like that. Yes, also to play the devil's advocate, people also do a good job, they do their research, especially as far as operations are concerned. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No problem.
So especially as far as operations are concerned, they do their research. However, apart from that, what they show about the personal lives of the soldiers, the officers, the troops, most of it, I would say most of it, and more often than not, it's not the truth. It's just to sell that stuff, like I would say, to put some masala into it. That's what it is, and that is what is sad about the whole thing. That they need to get it cleared by the defense before they put it out there. So yeah, Gunjan Saxena was pathetic, I would say, of how officers have been portrayed in that.
Right. Yes, sir. There were quite a few articles written by ex-military officers about it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the organization it's such a beautiful organization. You feel so strongly about it. You know that you are an officer and a gentleman and a lady first. Right. That's what's been ingrained into us. Correct. And the way things are shown, well, it's definitely it's far from the truth.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
That's my take on it.
Yeah. Hopefully,
more research needs to be done.
Right. Absolutely. Hopefully, in the future, films will be made with better homework done. That's our hope. Yeah.
I hope so too.
Yes, definitely. So this is something that we spoke about before, but this is something that our readers are very keen to know from you. Camaraderie in the forces. They're called brothers in arms for a reason, because you live, eat, breathe, fight, do everything with each other together. So what about you? Are you still in touch with the people you served with? Do you still meet? Do you have some special bonds that you made back in your time?
Of course. So brothers in arms, that's what we all are.
Yeah.
Something which binds us together is our course, our academies, and of course our regiments. We've as officers, we've gone through the training together. We've gone through the highs and lows of life together. So there's a special bond that all Coastmates have. I mean, I may not meet my Coastmate, or I may not speak with him for months, but suddenly he drops in at my place and he says, "Hey, let's have a drink, or let's have a beer," and you start off from where you left. It
Right.
was that gap is never there. But yes, I am in touch with my men. Most important is that the troops that I commanded, they still call me up on all the festivals, on my birthdays. They do keep in touch with me. Um, it's something which will never go away.
Yeah.
This is something, until your dying day, you would always be in touch with your troops, with your officers, with the people who have served with you. And that is something which never dies. That camaraderie is something which is inherent in this organization, and without camaraderie, this organization is hollow. And that is what I would say, that even today, every evening, I look forward to catching up with my Coastmates. We go out, we go together. It's that kind of a bond that we share. We are comfortable. We are comfortable with each other. So that's my take on that question of yours. It's an everlasting bond.
Absolutely, yes, sir. And it's something very unlike what you'd find otherwise. I think this institution gives you a bond like that, incomparable.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing that. My next question is about something very particular. Do you remember your last day of service, sir?
Well, yes, I remember that, and it wasn't it wasn't a very happy day. Uh, of course, the reason for leaving the services was personal. If I wanted, I could have continued, but it was voluntary that I decided to leave the organization. But it wasn't a very happy day for me. I remember it very clearly. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning. Normally, I would get up at 5:30. I woke up at 4:30, and I just went through the last 24 years of my life, how it has been, what all happened in those 24 years, which made me what I am today. And I think what I am today, I owe it to this organization. Whatever I've achieved in life, whatever I have got today, I'm grateful to this fine organization. So I woke up at 4:30 and I just randomly, I started penning down my thoughts, which of course became an article which I've published on LinkedIn. And I remember I wore my buddy. He set my uniform for the last day. Brassoed my ranks and everything. I wore that uniform every day. I would wear that uniform and I would feel like a Superman. It's that kind of a feeling that you have. And I went to the office, and you have a small ceremony where you have a tea party with your troops. I had that. I spoke with the officers. I spoke with the troops. We had a photograph session, and then I said, okay, the next thing that I want to do is to go to the war memorial and place a wreath over there. So there's a war memorial here, and I went there with my best friend in uniform. I placed a wreath to honor our brave hearts, and I don't know, at that point in time, I think the emotions were so overwhelming that I couldn't hold myself back. And I think tears started flowing down, that, okay, I'm not going to be wearing this uniform again, and I'm not going to be a part of this beautiful organization, which has actually taken care of me all these years. I think I owe everything. I owe my life to this organization. So yeah, that was my last day, and I couldn't sleep that night, thinking that that feeling of belonging to something wasn't there anymore. till now I belonged to this organization. After that, I didn't belong anywhere. So yeah, but anyway, I still do miss the organization, and I wish my organization the best.
Of course, sir. Yeah, and I think, of course, I'm maybe I have no knowledge about this, but I think you're always a part of even though you are not serving anymore. I think the establishment is still as much a part of you as you were a part of it.
Absolutely,
Yeah, right. So,
absolutely.
I
I'd love
mean,
to think that way.
definitely. So one of the veterans we interviewed earlier, this was something that he said, that I may have hung up my uniform, but the soldier in me is never going to leave. And I think that made a lot of every veteran we've interviewed till now has resonated with that sentiment. So
Yeah, absolutely. You can take a man out of the army, but you can't take the army out of the man.
absolutely, sir. Yeah, that is, I think, a great line, and it makes a lot of sense. So definitely, thank you for sharing that. Now, if if you had to sort of sum up your 24-year career in the most important learning that you had from the Indian Army, what would
Hmm.
that be?
Uh, so I would say that the most important lesson that I've learned is resilience, will to win against all odds, a never say die attitude, and perseverance in the face of adverse situations. And this is what I feel, that whatever life throws at you, whatever happens, you still need to get up and go back and come back stronger. So this is the most important lesson, I would say: resilience and never say die attitude.
I think that applies to every field and every sphere in life. So yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
absolutely, this thing.
So
And now, yeah.
that's the most important lesson.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. And now for my last question. There are several young aspirants who are going to be watching this and reading this interview. As a veteran, do you have a message for the young men and women who strive to wear the prestigious uniform?
Yes, the most important message is: do not join the services just for the uniform. It's the glamour will stay only for a few days,
Hmm.
but after some time, it'll all fade away if you're not passionate about serving the country. You need to be absolutely passionate about joining the military.
Hmm.
It's not a 9 to 5 job. Let me be very, very honest about it. What people say that it's just another job. It's not a job.
Hmm.
It's a way of life. You don't have any 9 to 5 time. 24 365, even on holidays, even on your authorized leave, the day you're told to come back, you will have to come back.
Right.
And if I have to sum up about this organization and what this organization stands for, is the Chetwood motto.
Yeah.
If
Yes,
you've
sir.
heard about that, yeah, the safety, honor, and welfare of your country comes first, always and every time. The honor, welfare, and comfort of the men that you command comes next. Your own ease, comfort, and safety comes last, always and every time. So, if you can relate to this,
Hmm.
or if this motto resonates with you, then you should join the services. Otherwise, please do not join the services just to think that how much money you're going to make. Let me tell you, the services gives you a good amount of money, but yes, if you really want to make money, there are a lot of other options to go out and make money. You need to be passionate. You need to think about the country. You need to think about the flag. You need to think about the citizens, and the most important, you need to think about the troops that you're going to command.
Hmm.
If the troops know that you're not passionate about the job, or you're not passionate about your role as an officer, then you do not need to be a part of this organization. You
Hmm.
need to answer to your troops first and foremost, the men that you're going to command. So that is what my take is, and I wish all the young men and women who are passionate, that please join the services. There's no better organization than the Indian military and the Indian Army. So that's my message.
That's wonderfully put, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for the message. Thank you for the interview. And most importantly, thank you for your service to the nation. And I don't think any of us will ever be able to thank any of you for what you do. And of course, interviewing you and putting your experiences out is just a small bit of our gratitude to people who have, done so much for us in the country. So once again, from the Defense Archive, from my end, from everybody in the team, a big, big thank you for doing this. And we're very, very honored to have done this with you, sir.
Thanks, Nivedha. Thank you so much.
Thank
And thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for giving this platform. Really
Our
grateful.
pleasure. Our pleasure, sir. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. All the best.